A dusty canyon, a dying echo of gunfire and whispers of lost gold. Skeleton Canyon holds a secret soaked in blood. In the 1880s, a band of desperados hijacked a fortune, only to have it vanish in the Arizona wilds. Bodies were left for vultures, and a legend was born of a treasure still waiting to be found. Welcome to Bad Things. Today, we'll dive into the tale of the Skeleton Canyon treasure, a story of betrayal, buried loot, and a mystery that has endured for over a century. Skeleton Canyon, straddling the Arizona-New Mexico line, earned its grisly name from the bones that once littered its trails. In the summer of 1881, a notorious gang of Mexican bandits known as the Estrada Gang was making a perilous trek through this canyon, hauling a spectacular hoard of stolen treasure. According to legend, they had plundered a cathedral in Monterey and even the mint at Chihuahua, filling pack mules with gold coins, silver bullion, and a cigar box of diamonds. The remote canyon was their smuggling route into Arizona, but lurking in the high rocks above was another gang, American outlaws lying in wait. On July 27, 1881, as the Mexican smugglers entered Skeleton Canyon's narrow defile, gunshots exploded from the cliffs. The Curly Bill Brocious Gang, a rogues gallery of tombstone cowboys that reportedly included Old Man Clanton, Johnny Ringo, Ike and Billy Clanton, the McClory brothers and others, sprang an ambush. The unsuspecting banditos never had a chance. Hidden riflemen picked them off one by one, sending mules stampeding in terror. Packs burst open, and countless coins clattered onto the rocks, their jingling drowned by the gunfire as the outlaws mercilessly shot down the runaway mules. When the smoke cleared, 15 to 19 Mexican smugglers lay dead, along with dozens of mules, their carcasses sprawled on the canyon floor. The attackers gathered what loot they could carry and buried the rest on the spot, planning to return with pack animals once it was safe. The scene left behind was hellish, a canyon of bleached skulls and scattered silver, with the survivors of the ambush being only the vultures and the desert wind. The outlaws rode back to Galeyville, a wild town on the edge of the Chiricahua Mountains, pockets heavy with gold and heads giddy with triumph. As they celebrated for days, drunkenly bragging in saloons, one of their leaders, Jim Hughes, had a different plan in mind. Hughes knew Curly Bill, their reputed boss, was out of town, so he conspired to cheat the rest of the gang out of the buried fortune. He recruited two younger outlaws, William Billy Grounds and Swing Hunt, for a secret mission. While the others were still brawling and carousing, Grounds and Hunt slipped away back to Skeleton Canyon. With them rode a Mexican teamster driving a sturdy wagon, hired under the promise of a share of the treasure. Under cover of darkness, they dug up the cached loot and loaded the wagon. But once the heavy treasure was safely moved to a new hiding place in a side canyon, the two turncoats repaid the unfortunate teamster with 2 bullets to the chest, killing him to keep the secret. They buried his body in the same pit as the treasure and burned the wagon to ashes to destroy any evidence. Rather than return to split the loot with Jim Hughes as agreed, Hunt and Grounds double-crossed him as well. They went into hiding in the desert, reportedly holing up in a remote cave near the new treasure site. Their plan was to lay low for the winter of 1881 to 82, then retrieve the gold in the spring and wagon it east to family property in Texas or Arkansas. For months, the pair lived like cornered animals. They were young guns in their early 20s, now sitting on a fortune in blood-stained loot and wanted for multiple murders. During this time, Billy Grounds grew increasingly anxious. He wrote a flurry of letters to his sister Maggie back in San Antonio, hinting at the treasure's hiding place in case anything happened to him. According to later accounts, 19 letters in total were sent by a friendly mail rider passing through the area. Each letter contained different pieces of the puzzle. Cryptic clues to the treasure's location, from descriptions of a cave marked by a crack forming a cross to mentions of smoke from a distant smelter on the horizon. In one letter, Billy described a cave at the mouth of the canyon and noted that, "From our lookout you can see the turf growing back over where we buried the treasure, down in the valley." He was essentially creating a treasure map bit by bit, fearful the letters might be intercepted if they were too explicit. Fate caught up with the two traitors before they could escape with their prize. In March 1882, lawmen in Cochise County were on high alert. Grounds and Hunt had been implicated in other crimes, including the cold-blooded murder of a Tombstone mining engineer during an attempted robbery. On March 29, 1882, a sheriff's posse led by Deputy William Breckenridge tracked the fugitives to Chandler's Milk Ranch, a remote ranch house east of Tombstone. Just before dawn, the officers surrounded the house. One overeager deputy, John Gillespie, pounded on the door and shouted, "It's me, the sheriff." The response was a blast of gunfire through the door. Gillespie fell dead, with a bullet to the head, and another posseman was wounded. A fierce 2-minute shootout erupted in the dim morning light. Billy Grounds leapt out, guns blazing, but was met with a shotgun blast. Deputy Breckenridge shot him in the face, killing him instantly. Zwing Hunt tried to flee out the back, exchanging shots with the lawman. He was hit in the chest and collapsed, grievously wounded. When the smoke cleared at Chandler Ranch, 2 men lay dead, Deputy Gillespie and Outlaw Grounds, and Hunt was barely clinging to life. The Tombstone Epitaph newspaper would label Hunt and Grounds as men of desperate character and praise the courage of the posse that brought them down. Hunt was transported to a Tombstone hospital under guard, the only living soul who knew where the treasure was buried. But the legend only grew from there. Within days, Zwing Hunt vanished from his hospital bed. Some say his loyal brother smuggled him out of town. Others claimed Hunt, tough as leather, staggered off into the wilderness despite his wound. One way or another, Hunt escaped official custody, cheating the hangman. He is believed to have died soon after. One story says Apache warriors killed him in the desert, another that he made it back to Texas, only to die of gangrene from his injuries. Before his death, Zwing reportedly revealed the treasure's location to a relative in his family. As the tale goes, he drew a crude map and gave a detailed description of the hiding spot to his uncle or brother. The directions spoke of a place near the foot of a certain Davis Mountain by a canyon with cottonwood trees and 2 nearby springs called Silver and Gum. 20 paces from an obelisk rock with 2 crosses chiseled into it lies the treasure, the dying outlaw supposedly explained. Armed with this map, the Hunt family and others spent years combing the canyons, convinced they could find Zwing's cache of loot. But their searches were in vain. They turned up only bleaching bones and a few stray Mexican coins scattered from the massacre. The bulk of the Skeleton Canyon treasure, if it existed, remained hidden. The legend took on a life of its own. In 1891, a tantalizing discovery was made. 2 cowboys riding through Skeleton Canyon found a weathered leather pouch stuffed with Mexican silver coins worth several $1,000s. It was lying in the brush as if tossed by a panicked mule a decade earlier. This find electrified local lore. It seemed to confirm that a fortune had indeed been lost in Skeleton Canyon, waiting for someone lucky or clever enough to find it. Over the following decades, treasure hunters, journalists, and Old West aficionados kept the story alive. The missing hoard has been estimated at anywhere from $30,000 in 1880s dollars, a fortune then, to well over $8 million in today's money, depending on which version of the tale you believe. In the 20th century, new clues emerged when copies of Billy Grounds' letters surfaced and a hand-drawn map attributed to Hunt's family began circulating. Generations of fortune seekers have scoured Skeleton Canyon with picks, shovels, and metal detectors. They've found spent bullets, old saddles, skeletal remains, even those few stray coins, but never the motherlode. As the years passed, the Skeleton Canyon treasure hovered between history and myth. Did a multi-million-dollar outlaw treasure truly lie buried in the Arizona borderlands, or was it all just a tall tale? Over 140 years later, the Skeleton Canyon treasure remains an unsolved mystery. Countless theories have been proposed to explain what really happened to the loot from that 1881 ambush. Let's explore the most prominent and compelling theories, from historian skeptics to treasure hunters' fervent beliefs, and weigh the evidence behind each. Still buried in the canyon, the treasure hunter theory. One pervasive theory is that the treasure was never recovered and still lies hidden somewhere in the rugged canyons of the Peloncillo Mountains, very possibly within a few miles of Skeleton Canyon. Treasure hunters point to the fact that both Grounds and Hunt died or disappeared before they could retrieve their stash, meaning no one else knew the exact spot. The pieces of the puzzle left behind, Hunt's deathbed map and Ground's secret letters, suggest the gold and silver were reburied in a remote side canyon, marked by unique landmarks like a cross-inscribed boulder and a concealed cave. Modern searchers like Fern F.C. Hamill have taken these clues seriously. Hamill spent years in the 1980s hunting the loot with a copied map and notes from Billy's letters, and he even found tantalizing evidence: remains of a burned wagon, a minor shack-shaped boulder, and the very cave that matched Billy's descriptions. Hamill became convinced the treasure was real and near, just frustratingly out of reach. He discovered that a massive earthquake in 1887 had shaken the region, toppling cliffs and possibly burying the trove under a landslide of rock. The map shows the canyon, and it shows where the cave is. Everything matches. But on account of the earthquake in 1887, I think the treasure is around 20 feet deep, Hamill said, noting that part of a mountain had slid over the site. In other words, the gold is likely still there, just entombed under tons of debris. Hamill joked that what he needed was a metal detector that can sense gold through 40 feet of stone and dirt to pinpoint the cache. Believers in this theory argue there's been just enough evidence to keep the legend alive. The found coins in 1891 hint at a scattered treasure. The reported discovery of a vase inscribed Maggie 1885 in a canyon cave suggests Billy's sister really did search there, and multiple clues from the letters lined up with real geography. All it would take is the right technology, or sheer luck, for someone to unearth the legendary Skeleton Canyon treasure at last. Already found or moved. The quiet recovery theory. Another theory posits that the treasure did not stay buried for long. Someone else found it or moved it years ago, and the fact never went public. One version of this theory suspects that other members of Curly Bill's gang got wind of Hunt and Ground's betrayal and went looking for the loot themselves. It's said that $700 in gold coins was floating around when the two outlaws tried to buy a wagon in 1882, tipping off their old cohorts that somebody had a hidden stash. In one account, some of the cowboys confronted Hunt and Grounds even before the law did, ambushing them at the Chandler Ranch to avenge the double cross and take back the gold. While historical records show the posse was responsible for that shootout, not the outlaw gang, it's still possible that Hughes or others later searched for the reburied loot on their own. If they found it, they certainly kept it secret. After all, it was stolen money, and implicating themselves wouldn't be wise. Another possibility is that Zwing Hunt's own family succeeded in locating the cache. We know Hunt mailed a map to his relatives, and his uncle and brother spent years looking. Could they have quietly recovered some or all of the treasure? No definitive record exists, but some treasure forums and lore have speculated that a portion might have been retrieved by those in the know, who then went silent about it. The 1891 discovery of a coin pouch lends weight to this theory. It could indicate that someone unearthed part of the hoard and accidentally dropped a bag on the way out. It's also notable that by the late 1880s and 1890s, no outlaw or lawman in Arizona suddenly became extravagantly wealthy, which one might expect if a multi-million-dollar treasure had been cashed in. Proponents of the already found theory suggest the treasure might have been recovered piecemeal. Perhaps the easily accessed portion was dug up soon after, and only a deeply buried remainder, if any, was left behind. In this scenario, today's treasure hunters could be chasing ghosts, fighting over a prize that was claimed long ago by unsavory characters or opportunistic locals who stumbled on it and wisely kept their mouths shut. Treasure of Legends, the Skeptic's Theory. The most down-to-earth explanation is that the Skeleton Canyon treasure was never as big or tangible as the legends claim. In essence, that it's an Old West myth built on kernels of truth. Serious historians point out several facts that pour cold water on the tale of a multi-million-dollar hoard. First, there are no reliable records in Mexico of a heist matching the scale of the supposed Monterey Cathedral and Chihuahua Mint robbery. A theft of that enormity would likely have been reported widely in 1881, yet contemporary newspapers mention no such incident. This suggests that the smugglers ambushed in Skeleton Canyon probably had a more modest cache, perhaps proceeds from smuggling or smaller raids, but not a treasure of legendary proportions. Indeed, one historian noted that there was never any record of thefts in Mexico that would have contributed to such a large treasure, concluding that each bushwhacking outlaw probably got only a small fortune from the stick-up. And what do outlaws do with ill-gotten gains? They blow it on women, whiskey, and cards. By this logic, the treasure wasn't lost at all. It was spent in the saloons and gambling halls of Tombstone's wild nightlife not long after the ambush. Skeptics also cast doubt on the authenticity of those famed letters and maps that treasure hunters rely on. Arizona historian Robert Palmquist has outright dismissed the notion of a waiting treasure, saying, "No, I don't believe that there is a Skeleton Canyon treasure waiting out there to be found." Palmquist and others find it unlikely that a 19-year-old outlaw like Billy Grounds would have literally incriminated himself by writing detailed letters home about a gigantic robbery. If such letters exist, they suspect a hoax or exaggeration, perhaps later forgeries meant to spice up a treasure story for magazines. Likewise, the colorful details about a cigar box of diamonds and dozens of gold bars might be pure folklore layered onto a simpler tale over time. The skeptic's theory essentially states that Skeleton Canyon did see an ambush and robbery, but the loot taken was not the king's ransom of legend. Most of it was divided and frittered away by the outlaws themselves. The portion supposedly buried and lost may have been minimal or even non-existent. A cover story concocted by the robbers to hide their tracks, or an embellishment by storytellers. After examining the timeline and weighing these theories, we must ask, what scenario best fits the known facts? Applying Occam's razor and a bit of detective reasoning, the most plausible outcome emerges. The simplest explanation is that the Skeleton Canyon treasure was real, but greatly exaggerated, and it never remained neatly piled in the ground for long. Here's what most likely happened. In reality, the gang of cowboys probably made off with a moderate amount of loot in 1881, enough to fill their pockets and saddlebags, but not the fantastic millions later claimed. They did bury a portion in the canyon, because with all their mules dead, they had no way to transport it at that moment. However, that cash didn't stay in the ground indefinitely. Hunt and Grounds unquestionably retrieved it within weeks during their double-cross operation. From that point on, the treasure was in their hands. What they could not foresee was how events would spiral out of control. Their involvement in other crimes brought the law down on them before they could ever enjoy the gold. When Billy Grounds and Zwing Hunt were taken out of the picture in March 1882, the knowledge of the treasure's new location nearly died with them. Now, had the buried hoard truly been a giant fortune, one might expect ripples in history. For instance, other gang members or family would eventually secure it, or someone would spend lavishly and draw attention. Instead, none of the outlaws from Curly Bill's circle suddenly retired rich. No mysterious wealth entered local circulation beyond the occasional gold coin, which strongly suggests that if a treasure was ever buried, it either hadn't been found or it was never as vast as legend claims. It had either been dissipated or hidden too well to ever surface. The letters and maps, while intriguing, have never led anyone to a payout. They feel more like half-finished riddles, possibly genuine clues that suffered from a key being lost, like the meaning of Davis Mountain, or possibly fabrications to keep a legend alive. So what most likely happened? The Estrada smugglers were indeed robbed and massacred. That part is brutally true. The cowboys did collect a pile of silver and gold, but by the time the smoke cleared on all the double crosses and shootouts, that plunder had been fragmented and effectively lost. Some of it was spent in wild fashion by the victors of the initial ambush. The remainder, moved to a second hiding spot by Hunt and Grounds, became a victim of both bad luck and bad intentions. Hunt's crude map and Grounds' letters were too little too late. They were a treasure hunt without an X marking the spot. Maybe a portion of the loot still lies under rocks in some nameless box canyon, but if so, nature has buried it so deep, with landslides and time, that it might as well be a grave. More likely, any substantial cash was quietly recovered or dissipated in the years shortly after, leaving behind only tantalizing scraps, a few coins here, a bit of lore there, to feed the legend. The Skeleton Canyon treasure endures mostly as a story, a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal in the Old West. The gang that stole it could not trust each other long enough to enjoy it, and as a result, the fortune melted away into the desert. What remains is the legend itself, gleaming and elusive, luring dreamers into the canyon with the promise of riches that, in all probability, have already turned to dust.